Hi, my name is Leslie Anderson, and my research proposal is on the dangers of cognitive biases and misinformation and how those lead to the distrust of outgroups, especially in digital spaces. So, the problem that I'm identifying is real and measurable. It ultimately examines how false or biased social media content strengthens pre-existing biases and reduces trust toward outgroups. Misinformation spreads faster, 70% faster than factual information, especially when it's emotionally laden or salient. If its purpose is to make us angry or afraid, it spreads faster. 64% of Americans say social media negatively affects society. And you can see that source is from 2020 at the height of misinformation about mask mandates and people not wanting to get the vaccination. And you'd think in the last 5 years it would have gotten better, but it has not. Cognitive biases like confirmation and the outgroup homogeneity effect distort how we interpret this information, and I'll talk a little bit about those in the next couple of slides. And together, these forces create distrust and polarization between social groups. My research question and hypothesis. So, my study aims to measure differences rather than correlations using an experimental design to isolate misinformation effect. So ultimately, I came down to the research question, is there a difference between exposure to misinformation versus balanced information versus neutral content in levels of trust and empathy toward outgroups? And I am going to use 3 different age groups, which you'll see in a few slides. So my alternative hypothesis is there is a difference between information conditions and trust and empathy levels. And my null hypothesis is there is no significant difference between those conditions. So my literature review, cognitive biases. So confirmation bias is when people choose to believe that what already fits their worldview while simultaneously ignoring information to the contrary. And outgroup homogeneity is where in our in-groups, you can go through people with every single person in your in-group and describe specifically how different they are. But when we look at outgroups, they all seem to be the same. We're not familiar with them. We don't know them. All we notice are similarities. So we often talk in terms of they are so, and it's always the same. So these biases shape how we perceive and evaluate social information, especially online. Also, if you think about how because of social media, a lot of the time our critical thinking isn't so great. Our news feeds and our social media feeds are all these algorithms are specifically designed to feed into what we've already shopped for and links we've already clicked. So our own device in our pockets is one of the reasons why we suffer from confirmation bias. And so we're very prone to these sorts of beliefs where it's the us versus them. The misinformation effect, we know that for repeated exposure to false statements increases perceived truth. And that fast news travels faster and farther than true news due to emotional content and salience. So this is called the illusory truth effect, which basically is what's been stated here. And there have been really interesting studies where even when the participants know, they have been told very specifically that the content is false, that after they have been exposed to it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, they start to think that it's more true the more times they see it due to the familiarity of that information. Thus, misinformation paired with these biases that we have, which we all have, it's human nature, but they can be combined in such a way to reinforce distrust. Okay, so the theoretical framework, um, unfortunately and nicely, kind of dovetail one into the next. So our cognitive biases and misinformation very nicely lead into reinforced stereotypes and thus finally into distrust. All right, so the method, participants in design, I have chosen to do 150, 50 in each group. I wanted to do a young, a middle, and an older age group. They will be recruited from schools, community centers, and online platforms. It will be a between subjects experimental design. And the power analysis is 150. This provides 80% power for medium effect size. I've also decided on 0.05 for rejecting or accepting the null hypothesis, and I will use a one-way ANOVA design. So for my variables and data collection, my independent variable is going to be types of information exposure. So my groups are going to be my misinformation condition, and each group will have 6 posts, and we'll have 5 minutes to look at each post. And then after they've had that 5 minutes, they will then be tested using the trust scale, the interpersonal reactivity index, and then finally the multiple threat and prejudice questionnaire. So in the misinformation condition, these 6 posts will include exaggerated or false claims. The balanced information group will have neutral fact-checked information, and then the neutral condition, the control condition, will have posts about something completely unrelated like animals or nature. So my hypothetical findings, I predict that as you move from the misinformation to the balance to the control condition, that the mean trust scores will increase and the standard deviations will decrease, and that this will be statistically significant. And the significance of the findings, I believe and predict that misinformation decreases trust and empathy. I believe that that will be found. Older adults will show the strongest effects, but after them, I believe it would be the youngest group, followed up by the 30 to 45-year-olds. And the implications for this are that emotionally charged misinformation reinforces the distrust of outgroups. So future research, I believe exploring longitudinal effects using the same group of people over time can really show, especially maybe in more important election years, as more candidates, as we see more advertisements, etc., and maybe try to gauge how people's thinking is changing, that we can really kind of pin down what's happening when we are faced with a lot of misinformation. Using underrepresented platforms like TikTok or Discord, I think, would also be able to explore different populations. And then interventions such as pre-bunking, I believe, could build resilience. And pre-bunking is just like a proactive method that builds resistance by kind of exposing people ahead of time to misinformation or warning them ahead of time, like, hey, you guys are going to see maybe in an election year a lot more false and fake stuff that you don't know if it's true or not. So by telling them that at the beginning, that maybe it can build up immunity, if you will, to misinformation. Finally, for my conclusion, misinformation and cognitive biases do interact to reduce empathy and trust. My findings could inform media literacy education, counseling and group bias reduction, as well as policy and platform interventions. And the ultimate goal is to foster empathy, reduce polarization, and strengthen digital resilience. And I think the most important thing is that critical thinking and empathy are antidotes to misinformation. And my last slide are my references. Thank you.